The courtroom echoed with the sharp crack of the gavel, silencing whispers as the judge's voice cut through the tense air. The guarded survivor sat motionless, eyes wide, heart pounding, as the verdict unfurled like a blade against her chest. The reluctant fire starter whispered, "It isn't over." The warm comforter leaned closer, steady hand brushing the survivor's arm, a gesture of calm that felt both soothing and suffocating. Outside, thunder rolled, a storm mirroring the turmoil within. The steady anchor clenched his jaw, steady but unreadable. The velvet blade, poised in the gallery, allowed the faintest smile, a shadowy figure pulling unseen strings. Above them all lingered the presence of the lingering memory, silent and spectral, a reminder of what was lost and what was at stake. Every breath in that moment carried the weight of unfinished battles, the verdict marking only the beginning of something far more dangerous. The hall outside the courtroom buzzed with voices, each one carrying the sharp edge of speculation. The guarded survivor walked with deliberate slowness, shoulders hunched as if bracing for unseen blows. The reluctant firestarter darted ahead, muttering, "They want us scared." The warm comforter followed close, steady hand briefly guiding her through the throng. The steady anchor stood apart, scanning faces with suspicion. The velvet blade lingered near the exit, a shadow in perfect composure. The lingering memory was present only in the survivor's thoughts, an echo carried in silence. Every corner felt like it hid judgment, every eye seemed to pierce, and the survivor knew this fight was no longer confined to the courtroom. The storm outside rattled the windows, its fury now chasing them into every step of the night. The rain outside fell heavier, its rhythm beating against the courthouse steps. The guarded survivor paused beneath the awning, staring into the storm, as if waiting for an answer that would not come. The reluctant firestarter tugged at her sleeve, urging her forward, muttering, "If we stay still, they'll crush us." The warm comforter offered an umbrella, voice low and steady, promising shelter against the night. The steady anchor remained silent, eyes narrowing at figures in the distance. The velvet blade stepped into view, composed beneath the storm, his umbrella perfectly shielding him. The lingering memory pressed itself into the survivor's thoughts, laughter from years gone, a fleeting voice that whispered against the rain. Storm swallowed their silence, each drop a reminder that nothing would remain unchanged. The street stretched empty beyond the courthouse, lights flickering weakly under storm clouds. The guarded survivor stepped into the rain, head lifted, letting cold water run across her face. The reluctant firestarter shouted, "You can't just walk blind." The warm comforter hurried beside her, umbrella now useless, his words a soft tether against chaos. The steady anchor pulled keys from his pocket, leading them toward a waiting car, his silence heavier than thunder. Across the street, the velvet blade watched with patient calm, a predator waiting for the right strike. In the survivor's mind, the lingering memories face blurred with raindrops, familiar features distorted by grief. Each step into the storm felt like defiance, a march against forces too vast to see but too real to deny. The car doors slammed shut, muting the roar of the storm. Inside, the silence was thicker, broken only by the windshield wiper's rhythm. The guarded survivor leaned back, wet hair clinging, eyes unfocused. The reluctant firestarter muttered, "They'll chase us no matter where we go." The warm comforter reached from the front seat, voice steady, urging calm. The steady anchor drove without a word, hands tight on the wheel, eyes locked on the road ahead. In the rearview mirror, a flash of headlights cut through the rain, lingering too close. The velvet blade's unseen presence pressed into the moment, a reminder that no escape was clean. The lingering memory floated unspoken between them all, a shadow that filled the car more than the storm outside. Each mile carried them deeper into a truth no one could yet name. The car stopped outside a dim apartment block, rain dripping from the eaves. The guarded survivor stepped out slowly, shoulders tense as if carrying invisible weight. The reluctant firestarter darted ahead, muttering, "This place feels like a trap." The warm comforter unlocked the door with steady hands, voice calm, saying they needed to rest. The steady anchor carried a duffel bag inside, his silence speaking louder than words. The velvet blade was nowhere in sight, but the survivor felt his presence lurking in every shadow. The lingering memory stirred inside her thoughts, a faint laugh echoing from years past. Inside the apartment, the flickering light revealed peeling walls and a table stacked with files. Justice was a distant star, but tonight it began with one fragile flame inside 4 damp walls. The apartment smelled of dust and damp paper, the air heavy with secrets. The guarded survivor ran her hand over stacks of files, trembling as she whispered, "These are the forgotten voices." The reluctant fire starter perched on the arm of a chair, sharp eyes scanning headlines. The warm comforter brewed tea on a rusty stove, his calm movements a contrast to the rising tension. The steady anchor sat at the table, flipping through evidence with practiced hands, muttering names under his breath. A storm rumbled beyond the windows, the velvet blade's shadow looming in every crack of thunder. The lingering memory appeared in an old photo tucked between files, smiling forever young. Each page pulled them deeper, binding them closer to truths others would kill to bury. Lightning flashed, and the room seemed to shudder with truth too sharp to ignore. The guarded survivor held a torn file close, whispering, "They knew everything." The reluctant fire starter slammed his fist on the table, shouting, "Then why did they stay silent?" The warm comforter placed a hand on his shoulder, murmuring, "Anger will burn us faster than them." The steady anchor turned a page, his eyes dark with something unsaid. The velvet blade's unseen hand hovered in every missing page, every censored line. The lingering memory's faint scent lingered, a reminder of innocence stolen. Outside, thunder rolled, drowning the silence that followed. In that room, alliances shifted, truth sharpened, and the weight of what they discovered pressed against every breath they took. The storm quieted for a moment, leaving the apartment cloaked in heavy silence. The guarded survivor stared at the wall, as if she could see through it to the answers buried deep. The reluctant fire starter's voice broke, saying, "I can't carry this alone." The warm comforter poured steaming tea into chipped cups, his words low, "None of us carry it alone." The steady anchor glanced up, his jaw hard, warning, "Trust can ruin us faster than lies." The velvet blade's presence tightened around them, a phantom chokehold. The lingering memory flickered again in their minds, his ghostly laugh a thread binding them together. In that fragile pause, they realized justice was not just about truth. It was about surviving long enough to reveal it. The clock ticked past midnight, each second scraping against their nerves. The guarded survivor whispered, "We're already targets." The reluctant fire starter leaned close, his voice sharp, "Then let them come." The warm comforter sighed, setting down his cup, his words deliberate, "Courage without caution kills." The steady anchor rose, his shadow stretching long, saying nothing as he gathered files into a bag. The velvet blade's presence loomed outside in the storm, as though he controlled the silence itself. The lingering memory appeared in the flicker of the lamp, forever frozen, forever watching. Within those walls, they bound themselves with fear and resolve. Their fight was no longer a choice, it was survival. The apartment table became a battlefield of papers, each file revealing truths sharper than knives. The guarded survivor whispered, "They buried everything." The reluctant fire starter slammed a folder shut, shouting, "Then we dig it back up." The warm comforter leaned forward, urging calm, his voice steady, "If we rush, we'll be destroyed before we begin." The steady anchor's eyes narrowed as he traced redacted lines, muttering, "Someone inside made this disappear." Outside, sirens wailed through the storm, a reminder of danger inching closer. The velvet blade remained invisible, but his fingerprints were on every missing page. The lingering memory lingered in an old note, scribbled with a familiar hand, echoing like a ghost between them. The rising storm outside mirrored the rising fire within, both forces colliding as the path toward justice grew more perilous. Morning broke with gray light, but no relief. The guarded survivor stood at the window, eyes sunken, whispering, "Daylight doesn't mean safety." The reluctant firestarter paced the floor, muttering curses, his hands restless. The warm comforter offered bread and tea, his steady tone masking the worry in his eyes. The steady anchor adjusted his jacket, voice firm, "We need allies who can't be bought." The velvet blade's influence pressed against them, unseen yet suffocating, woven into every silence. The lingering memory flickered in a reflection on the window glass, forever young, forever unreachable. Outside, the city stirred awake, blind to the storm gathering in its quiet corners. Inside the apartment, hope and fear sat across the same table, bound together by necessity more than trust. The storm outside returned by noon, and with it, new danger. The guarded survivor spread photographs across the table, her voice trembling. These faces were erased. The reluctant firestarter's eyes blazed, muttering, "People don't just vanish." The warm comforter leaned closer, pointing to one blurred image, his tone soft, "This one still has a chance." The steady anchor's silence cut deeper than words, his jaw clenched as though the weight was personal. The velvet blade's shadow seemed to seep from the images themselves, an architect of disappearance. The lingering memory hovered behind every blurred smile, haunting and accusing. Lightning lit the room, thunder cracking like a warning. The truth no longer whispered, it screamed, demanding action, demanding sacrifice none were sure they could endure. The night came heavy and loud, but their voices rose above it. The guarded survivor gripped the table edge, her voice raw. "We can't go back." The reluctant firestarter shouted, "Then we burn it all forward." The warm comforter tried to soothe, words like balm, "Rage without direction feeds them." The steady anchor slammed his fist once, muttering, "I know what betrayal looks like, and it's close." The velvet blade's influence hung like smoke, invisible but choking. The lingering memory appeared in the flicker of candlelight, a shadow among them. Fear and determination collided in that room, each word shaping the fragile alliance between hearts wounded by loss. The storm outside raged, but the real battle was in the eyes that refused to break. Shadows deepened as midnight struck, the city outside alive with sirens and storms. The guarded survivor whispered, "They're already watching us." The reluctant firestarter sat near the window, muttering, "Let them see." The warm comforter leaned back, exhaling slow, saying, "Defiance is useless if it kills the truth." The steady anchor packed folders into a case, his expression unreadable. The velvet blade's presence pressed heavier than ever, as though the very walls belonged to him. The lingering memory's outline glowed faintly, a silent witness bound to their fate. They knew then, justice was no longer a question of courage but a gamble of survival. The fight had begun in earnest, and none of them could turn away. The room fell silent when the steady anchor dropped a folder on the table, his voice low. "This isn't an accident. It's my signature." The guarded survivor froze, her breath caught, whispering, "You betrayed us." The reluctant firestarter surged forward, fists clenched, shouting, "You're the reason they vanished." The warm comforter stepped between them, voice trembling, "We can't unravel now." The steady anchor's eyes darkened, admitting, "I thought I was saving lives." The velvet blade's ghostly smile appeared in every shadow, his grip exposed through betrayal. The lingering memory flickered in the corner, his outline sharpened with accusation. Trust splintered in that moment, the alliance fractured by truth. The storm outside roared as if it too demanded blood for lies. The guarded survivor's voice cracked, "You sold us out for power." The steady anchor slammed his hand down, eyes fierce. "No, I traded one wound for another." The reluctant firestarter spat, "That's no trade, that's murder." The warm comforter pressed his palms flat, whispering, "If we fight each other, he wins." Lightning flashed, and for a moment, the velvet blade's reflection appeared in the rain-slicked window, mocking them with calm. The lingering memory surfaced through a torn photograph, his face once trusted now bound to betrayal. The storm rattled glass panes, until the whole apartment seemed ready to break. In that moment, they realized the enemy was not just outside but seated among them. Silence stretched, heavier than thunder. The warm comforter lowered his gaze, his voice soft but cutting. I knew of his deal, and I stayed silent. The guarded survivor staggered, whispering, "Both of you." The reluctant firestarter's voice cracked in fury. "We trusted you." The steady anchor's fists shook as he muttered, "We thought we were sparing lives." The Velvet Blade's plan had unfolded without lifting a finger. Betrayal had fractured the circle. The lingering memory appeared sharper now, a bright reminder of the ones they failed. Thunder shook the building, lamps flickered, and the silence of realization pierced deeper than any scream. Trust bled out across the floor like spilled ink. Every bond now felt poisoned, every promise unsteady. The guarded survivor rose, trembling but resolute, whispering, "If we're broken, he wins." The reluctant firestarter snarled, "We're already broken." The warm comforter reached out, voice shaking, "We can still mend what matters." The steady anchor's face twisted, guilt and defiance warring, muttering, "I'll make it right, even if it kills me." The Velvet Blade lingered unseen, orchestrator of their collapse, his silence more powerful than words. The lingering memories formed shimmered by the window, his presence urging them to endure. Rain hammered glass like fists of judgment, drowning the words they no longer knew how to say. Their alliance had cracked, but their fight was not finished. Only blood could decide what bound them now. The night broke open with thunder so fierce it shook their bones. The guarded survivor whispered, "We'll fight forward, no matter who stands in the way." The reluctant firestarter hissed, "Even if the traitors sit beside us." The warm comforter lowered his voice, "Justice demands we survive first." The steady anchor closed his eyes, whispering, "Then let me be the shield, even if it damns me." The Velvet Blade's unseen hand tightened around them, the architect of their despair. The lingering memory stood clear in their minds, his smile a haunting call to rise. The storm roared like a crowd demanding resolution. Inside that room, fractured and bleeding, they decided that truth would be pursued, even if it cost everything left. The courthouse steps were flooded with reporters, cameras flashing like lightning. The guarded survivor pushed through the chaos, whispering, "This ends tonight." The reluctant firestarter shouted over the noise, "Thou twist every word." The warm comforter steadied her shoulder, murmuring, "Then let the truth be louder." The steady anchor stood behind, a wall of silence, carrying files like weapons. The Velvet Blade appeared at the top of the stairs, elegant and composed, his smile carved from ice. The lingering memory flickered in the survivor's mind, whispering strength she no longer thought she had. Thunder rolled in the distance, the storm echoing their fury. Every step forward carried the weight of final judgment, and there was no turning back. Inside the courtroom, silence was absolute, every breath sharp. The guarded survivor stood at the witness stand, voice trembling yet strong. They silenced the innocent. The reluctant firestarter leaned forward, fists gripping the rail, eyes burning. The warm comforter sat close, his face unreadable, torn between loyalty and guilt. The steady anchor placed the files before the judge, his voice steady. "The truth is here." The Velvet Blade rose from his seat, his tone silk and venom. "The truth bends to those who wield it." The lingering memory pulsed through every word, a reminder of the dead who demanded justice. Thunder cracked, shaking windows, as if even the storm judged this battle. The moment had arrived, a reckoning born of loss and betrayal. The guarded survivor's voice grew louder, her words cutting through the court. They erased him and countless others. The reluctant firestarter shouted, "Show them the truth." The warm comforter clenched his jaw, whispering, "Careful or we'll lose it all." The steady anchor stepped closer, pushing the torn files across the table. The Velvet Blade's smile never faltered, his tone honeyed, "The dead do not speak." Yet the lingering memory seemed to stir, his presence shimmering like a voice unsilenced. Gasps filled the courtroom as evidence landed like hammer blows. Lightning lit the chamber, shadows leaping like ghosts. The clash was no longer words, but a war of wills. The battle for truth had finally consumed them all. The courtroom erupted in chaos, voices clashing like thunder. The guarded survivor shouted, "He's behind it all." The reluctant fire starter leapt to his feet, yelling, "No more silence." The warm comforter tried to calm him, voice breaking, "We'll lose everything if we fall apart here." The steady anchor's fists struck the table, his voice fierce, "This ends tonight." The velvet blade raised his hands with chilling calm, his words silk, "You accuse shadows, while the world craves order." The lingering memory's presence pressed like a drumbeat, urging them onward. The storm outside rattled the windows, glass trembling like it might shatter. In that storm of words and fury, the truth clawed its way into light, refusing to die. The final moment came like a blade drawn in silence. The guarded survivor's voice shook but did not falter. "Justice will not be buried again." The reluctant firestarter shouted, "Not while we breathe." The warm comforter's head lowered, tears streaking as he whispered, "Then let it burn." The anchor stepped forward, file raised high, roaring, "Here is your truth." The velvet blade finally faltered, his perfect mask cracking as shadows betrayed his calm. The lingering memory glowed brighter than ever, his presence no longer haunting but guiding. Thunder crashed, louder than gavel or voice. In that instant, every heart in the room knew this was the breaking point. Justice would live or die here. The courtroom sat in silence after the storm of words, heavy with judgment. The guarded survivor bowed her head, whispering, "Did we win or just survive?" The reluctant firestarter muttered, "Surviving is winning when they want you gone." The warm comforter sat with hands clasped, eyes damp, whispering, "Truth is fragile, but it breathed tonight." The steady anchor leaned on the table, his voice hoarse, some truths scarred deeper than lies. The velvet blade was escorted out, still composed, his calm shattered only in his eyes. The lingering memory shimmered faintly, a reminder of those they fought for. Rain slowed outside, leaving only the faint rumble of thunder. Justice was not pure, but it had drawn breath, and that was enough to keep hope alive. The guarded survivor walked down the courthouse steps, the air sharp with damp stone. She whispered, "The world outside will never know the price." The reluctant firestarter snapped, "Then we tell them." The warm comforter steadied his steps beside her, murmuring, "Telling isn't always believing." The steady anchor followed, carrying nothing now, his burden carried in silence. The velvet blade's absence hung heavy, his shadow still stretching beyond the walls. The lingering memory flickered in the drizzle, his silent smile a thread of strength. Cameras flashed, but the truth in their hearts felt heavier than light. Thunder rolled faintly in the distance, but the storm had already moved inside them. Justice was earned, but it had left them marked. Inside the car, silence wrapped them tighter than the rain ever had. The guarded survivor whispered, "I don't know who I am after this." The reluctant firestarter leaned forward, voice sharp, "You're the one who fought." The warm comforter spoke gently, "Fighting isn't living, you must heal." The steady anchors stared out the window, muttering, "Healing never erases." The velvet blade's voice seemed to linger in memory, mocking their scars. The lingering memory glowed faintly in the rear view, a ghost tethered to their pain. Streetlights blurred past like streaks of fading fire. Each mile carried them further from the courthouse, but closer to the wounds carved into their souls. Survival had been bought, but the cost was endless. At a quiet diner on the edge of the city, the guarded survivor traced circles on her cup, whispering, "The fight doesn't end here." The reluctant firestarter smirked, "Then let's set it ablaze." The warm comforter leaned in, voice gentle, "Fires consume more than they save." The steady anchor lifted his coffee, voice flat, "But silence kills faster." The velvet blade's absence loomed like smoke, his reach still unbroken. The lingering memory appeared in the reflection of the window, smiling faintly as though approving their resolve. Neon signs flickered outside, colors bleeding into the rain-soaked street. Their words were tired, but their spirits carried the same unshaken flame. Justice wasn't done, it was only waiting. The night deepened as they stepped back into the storm, drenched streets glowing under flickering lamps. The guarded survivor whispered, "We'll carry this alone now." The reluctant fire starter shouted, "No, together or nothing." The warm comforter placed a hand on both their shoulders, saying, "Together doesn't erase betrayal, but it builds strength." The steady anchor followed quietly, his silence finally heavy with regret. The velvet blade's shadow stretched somewhere unseen, the fight far from finished. The lingering memory glowed brighter in their minds, his voice a phantom echo, "Don't stop." The storm swallowed their figures, but the fire in their hearts burned against the darkness. Justice was unfinished, but alive. The guarded survivor stood alone at the edge of the city, her breath visible in the cold night air. She whispered, "Justice lives, but it limps." The reluctant fire starter joined her, voice sharp, "Limping is still moving." The warm comforter walked slowly behind them, his voice low, "Some wounds never close." The steady anchor lingered at the shadows, carrying regret that weighed heavier than the files he once held. The velvet blade's shadow stretched from somewhere unseen, promising the battle was not done. The lingering memory shimmered faintly, smiling in silence, as though bidding them forward. The street was quiet, but their hearts thundered. The world would never see this moment, yet it was here where the future tilted on one fragile breath. The guarded survivor pulled the unread letter from her coat, fingers trembling. She whispered, "I never opened it." The reluctant fire starter leaned close, muttering, "Maybe you should." The warm comforter's voice was calm, "The truth written hurts less than the truth erased." The steady anchor's eyes dropped, his silence louder than words. The velvet blade's influence haunted even the paper, as though his hand had reached into her pocket. The lingering memory appeared faintly behind her, his outline urging her to read. Rain began to fall lightly, each drop like a heartbeat. The world outside slept, but in her hand lay the echo of everything lost, everything broken, everything waiting to be faced. The guarded survivor tore the envelope open at last, her hands shaking. The reluctant fire starter whispered, "What does it say?" The warm comforter leaned closer, eyes soft, waiting. The steady anchor turned away, his face tight with guilt. The velvet blade's presence felt like smoke, twisting through their lungs as the words were read. The lingering memory stood clear for the first time, his figure glowing as if freed. The letter's words bled with truth. The fight was never about winning, but remembering. Tears welled as silence deepened, broken only by thunder in the distance. The survivor knew then that the past would always haunt, but it no longer had to own her. The guarded survivor raised her head, whispering, "We carry him with us." The reluctant fire starter wiped his eyes, muttering, "Then let's carry him loud." The warm comforter nodded, voice trembling, "He is the fire that keeps us." The steady anchor stepped closer, his words breaking, "I will bear what I cause." The velvet blade's absence was heavier than presence, a silence that promised return. The lingering memory glowed bright, his form steady as though finally at peace. The storm eased, leaving soft drizzle, and neon lights flickered weakly in the distance. Their circle was fractured, but the wound was now their bond. Justice had scarred them, but it had also bound them beyond betrayal. The final streetlight flickered above as they walked into the darkness together. The guarded survivor whispered, "Justice isn't finished." The reluctant fire starter growled, "Then neither are we." The warm comforter's voice was calm, "The truth is heavier than any chain." The steady anchor whispered, "And I'll carry it until the end." The velvet blade's shadow lingered in the distance, waiting for another strike. The lingering memory glowed above them faintly, his presence no longer sorrow, but a torch leading forward. The storm had passed, but its echo would never fade. Their silhouettes disappeared into the night, carrying wounds, carrying hope, carrying the power of one choice that had changed everything forever.